So good afternoon and welcome to the webinar again, Farmers Markets for the 2021 season. This is a joint venture between the University of Illinois Extension and the Illinois Farmers Market Association. My name is Lori George and I'm one of the U of I local food systems and small farms educators housed in the Mount Vernon area. With the new farmers market season coming up shortly, there have been some concerns and questions as to what the guidelines will be for the 2021 season. Our speaker today is Jane Maxwell, Executive Director of the Illinois Farmers Market Association. Janie is very passionate about local food and farmers markets. She is a registered dietitian and works to promote the health and economic impact of local food and farmers markets. Today, she will talk to us concerning the new guidelines and will be available to answer any questions you may have after the presentation. Welcome back, Janie.
Thank you, Lori. And again, thank you to the University of Illinois Extension for this partnership that allows the Illinois Farmers Market Association to bring these webinars. So really appreciate that partnership. So today we are going to talk about the 2021 farmers market season and the guidelines that have been recently published. And as Lori said, we will certainly allow time for questions at the end of the presentation. So just a little bit about the Farmers Market Association. Our goal is to really take Illinois farmers markets to the next level of excellence. We do a lot of training and emphasis on best practices for farmers markets, promoting farmers markets, talking about farmers markets and their benefits, as well as advocating for farmers markets to make sure that they can fully open in 2021 and operate successfully. The Illinois Farmers Market Association is part of the Connect Fresh Collaborative. It is a data sharing system with Market Maker, and you will see that Farmers Market Association is one of many partners that shares data within this system. And so we always ask the Illinois farmers markets to register within this system, to give us as much detail as you possibly can about your farmers markets, so that we're looking for a new release, an update of the software within the first weeks of April. And then the map that's on our Illinois Farmers Market Association website will be searchable. And so the more information you put in about your farmers market, like day, time, amenities, different things, the better. The other thing I'd really encourage you to do is to update it many times. Don't, because it's easy to update, I would encourage you to put out there what you know to be true and not what you hope will happen over the course of the 2021 season. Other reason I really encourage you to do this is that last year during COVID, we found the use of this market maker database system through the Farmers Market Association to really increase. We saw a tremendous number of people looking for information on food and farmers markets as we went into that 2021 season. Wrong way. All of that information that is within the Market Maker data system is also available in what we call our What's in Season app. That's available at ILFMA.org for download. And it's a great way to see all sorts of great information about local food, what's in season, given the different regions within the state, and also connects people in a very easy to use manner with their farmers markets. And if you're not already a member of the Illinois Farmers Market Association Market Managers Network group on Facebook, I highly recommend that you do that. It's a great place to ask questions. I know there were a number of questions even about starting the 2021 season where other farmers market managers can chime in and potentially provide insights and feedback in a timely way. So I encourage you to go ahead and ask to be a part of that group. Well, I probably don't have to even have this slide in here for this group, but one of the things that I think did happen in 2020 is we saw farmers markets reframed a little bit. I still long for the day where I can see this massive tents and massive people all gathering for an enjoyable social community event, as well as purchasing tremendous local products at a farmer's market. But during 2021, there became a particular emphasis on seeing farmers markets as food access opportunities and also a place for our link users, our supplemental nutrition assistance program users, to be able to use their benefits at the market. It also became a place where we realized the importance of food aggregation, because even though we saw the onset of a whole lot of online or delivery or all these different variation of products being offered, it still required some maneuvering and purchasing from a variety of vendors. And so when you go to a farmer's market, it's all in one place. Farmers markets can also be tremendous business incubators for small farms, but also bigger farms. It becomes the face to the community, the face to your market, the face where customers react and interact with their vendors, and it builds relationships that then turn into sales. We do know that there's a tremendous economic impact that's kept local, and we also see that there's a maximum return for our vendors. There's no other place that a vendor sells their product that basically 95 to 97% of the money exchanged goes directly back to the vendor. There are no other costs except for the minimal costs of coming to the farmer's market, rather than any of the other supply chain vehicles that are available, whether it's through traditional groceries or whether it might even be from a farmer delivering that type of product to the community. There are definite community benefits when I think about health and the impact of that. And we also saw something in 2020 that was really important, and that was farmers markets have a very short supply chain. The food that is produced does not travel a tremendous number of miles in order to get to the customer base. We have been working to address the barriers for farmers markets. We have been putting together toolkits that are based on the Restore Illinois guidance that comes out at the state level. We have really pushed this emphasis on food access versus special events, because in many of our communities, special events are still being highly regulated or maybe not happening at all, where a farmer's market is a food access point, and I think is a lot more important to the community to actually go ahead and offer those events. We have been working to promote the benefits of farmers markets, and then also to address this barrier that our SNAP or link users have to using their benefits online, let's say for the opportunity to pre-order or whatever that may be. And so we continue to work with our partners, because here in Illinois, I think the retailers accepting SNAP online have increased, but it's still Walmart, Amazon, and I believe Aldi. And we're always prepared for what's next, or preparing. So the 2020 season, we saw a whole lot of activity. We saw many markets and vendors go through multiple iterations, maybe starting even with drive-throughs, going to online ordering, doing curbside pickups, doing face-to-face markets with curbside pickup. There were just all these iterations that became a part of the 2020 season. We did see problems in the food chain, and many of our markets were delayed, but despite the delay, this increased demand by the customer base for local food really increased. And many of our vendors saw, if not increased sales, saw same sales, even given that the markets were open for less time. And there was more link use as well. So as we start 2021, I know last year none of us believed that we would be talking about COVID in 2021, but we are. And the COVID-21 protocols remain as we open for the 2021 season. They may change as the season progresses. And so as we see change, we will host webinars and update our guidance and make sure that the most up-to-date information is available to you. And we did find that our customers fell in love with convenience. And so many of the market models, especially using some iteration of online sales, are continuing into this next market season. Farmers markets do remain on track for opening. And I think we can all breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief that our customer base is used to the COVID modifications of wearing a mask and social distancing, so that hopefully as we come to this 2021 season, we're not spending quite as much time on customer education as we were at the beginning of the 2020 season. The toolkits and a resource page are available at ilfma.org. And I encourage you to go look at all the resources that are there. But we are currently in Restore Illinois Phase 4. So the basics of those requirements in Restore Illinois 4, now these are not ILFMA's requirements. These are put out by the Department of Commerce. These are state level requirements that masks are required. They are not optional. All practices must support social distancing, that there are capacity limits, that we need to be sure that we are clearly communicating the expectations of our customer base as they come to the market. Enhanced sanitation is still required. And what has flipped is, remember last year we were talking about farmers markets as essential businesses. And that was an important piece to allowing farmers markets to open. As the year went on, farmers markets may still be considered essential, but the guidance that's written at the state level is now based on your business model. Where does your business fall? And so farmers markets are considered retail, but with the additional restrictions that also apply to flea markets. So we are under some additional restrictions under this Restore Illinois Phase 4. So first, masks are required. It's just a requirement. I did read one of the questions prior to the webinar, and I have not seen anywhere that vaccinated or unvaccinated people, for that matter, are no longer required to wear masks. Masks are required. There's a state level mandate for that. It applies to farmers markets. It applies to everywhere. They must fully cover your nose and mouth. And per the American Disabilities Act, we must give a reasonable accommodation to our vulnerable populations or people that have, let's say, a medical condition that would prohibit them from wearing a mask. It doesn't mean that you have to let them into your market. All it means is that you need to provide a reasonable accommodation. Maybe that is a list of all of your vendors that are accepting pre-orders online. Or maybe that is the offer from volunteer or staff to do the shopping for this particular patron. Maybe you have a set time for people who would fall into this category. It doesn't mean you have to let people into your market without a mask. All it means is that you need to provide a reasonable accommodation. Now, capacity limits are in place. And as I said, we are currently in the Restore Illinois Phase 4. So what that means is that whatever square footage you have, you are allowed 25% of the set capacity, or 15 people per 1,000 square feet. Now, that we are hopeful that we will move to the Restore Illinois Bridge to Phase 5. If you remember, Phase 5 is when there are no restrictions. So Phase 4 is where we are, but this bridge to Phase 5, we see increased capacities of 30 people per square foot or 15 people for 1,000 square foot indoors. So it depends what phase we're in, but we are currently in this Phase 4. Now the movement from Phase 4 to the bridge to Phase 5 is dependent on state level parameters. You're going to find that those are based on vaccination rates and hospitalizations, but that will be set by the state. And when we're ready for that, we know that farmers markets will be able to increase their capacity to 30 people per square feet. So how do you determine this if it's not something you've already done, or you can't ask your municipality what it is, how many square feet you have for your market? Google Earth to the rescue. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it will measure square feet for you, and then you can calculate capacity. And so it's quite easy to do. It's going to go Google Earth, I even just searched for the Batavia Farmers Market. I didn't just search for Batavia, and I came up with where it was located. I was able to draw a pretty specific outline of the market, and then it calculated, and I could set that I wanted the answer in square feet. So you can see that over on the right, that this area is quite large, and it comes in at about 67,000 square feet. And so then you would calculate that at currently at the 15 people per 1,000 square feet, and that would give you your capacity. So if that's not something that you've done or you're not familiar with, this is a tool that you can use to get to that number. The other thing that's new in this iteration of the guidance is wellness screenings. I don't know if you've been to a doctor's office or something like that in the last months, but typically before you schedule your appointment or before they let you in, you have to go through a series of wellness screening questions. These are questions that you can determine, as you will see on the right there. There are some examples of wellness questions. These were adapted from the Chicago City Markets wellness questions. And it's a matter of, it doesn't have to be done on site. You can require your vendors, your staff, your volunteers to all do this prior to leaving for the market at home. But it is something that should be documented so that you have record that your workforce, the people that are coming to your market to work, volunteers, staff, or vendors, are not showing signs and symptoms of COVID-19 on the day of your market. So this is something new. And then, of course, setting up for social distancing, whether that means while people are shopping, while they're paying. And I have a particular interest in making sure that we protect our vendors and our staff. I think that's really an important piece. If you think about the retail setting, I haven't been in too many retail places in the last year, but the few that I have been to all have plexiglass, excuse me, dividers between myself and whoever is helping me check out. And in the farmers market setting, we don't typically have plexiglass dividers, although I did see a number of vendors actually invest in those and use them last year. So that's where we need to set up space and make sure that there is enough space within the confines of maybe the booth or the stall or even the market to ensure the adequate social distancing. So what's that going to look like? Well, it may mean that you offer vendor service where the vendor actually has the option to select for the customer, or it may mean that you offer self-service. Either one would be an appropriate way to set up your a market. One, again, you have to make sure you have enough space given the capacity limits, and then also leaving it up to the vendor's choice. I heard mixed things last year. I heard some vendors tell me they will never go back to letting customers touch their products because they were just so pleased not to have to deal with some of the food safety issues that come from customer selection. But then we also had other vendors who were very concerned that they use their customers as their labor force in selecting products, and that put an exceptional burden on them as they ran the market. So this year, as long as your market is set up with enough space, then either option would be considered open. Now, I would recommend, and the documents say you recommend touch-free or touchless transactions. Well, that can be payment or the shopping part, but we want to have as little interaction as possible with the customer base. You can see in the picture on the right that would potentially, if it wasn't well marked, maybe with some arrows on the ground about how to shop that particular area, that you could get congestion from customers as they were selecting their products and waiting in line. But if you think about how to set up the booth and the stalls so that there's adequate spacing, either method would be considered appropriate for this coming year. Enhanced sanitation is required. Hand washing stations or CDC approved sanitizer in every vendor stall. I think adding the sanitizer option takes the burden off the hand washing stations, although that certainly is highly recommended. Wiping down high touch surfaces, I believe the requirement is every 2 years, every 2 hours. Touchless transactions, of course, as much as possible. And then I don't think we can forget good food safety practices. This is one of my favorite pictures I took myself from a farmer's market in 2020, pre-COVID. And I think it's just a good reminder to all of us the importance of just general food safety at our farmers markets, and not just the food safety that the enhanced sanitation has brought with it. So these are the guidelines. You can download these from the ILFMA website. There's actually a newer version than the one that I'm showing you today. It is dated March 29th, which would be today. I found something that I wanted to change this morning. But the way we do this is we have the Restore Illinois guidelines, but they aren't specific for farmers markets. So we try and think about how do you take those very specific guidelines that are published by the state and make it applicable to farmers markets. At the local level, it is the local health department that has the final say. These are recommendations, but many health departments and jurisdictions or market managers have shared that they've appreciated having a starting point, a place to begin setting up and planning for the market that takes into account the state level guidance, as well as some general recommendations for how to run the farmers market. Because like we said, they don't specifically say farmers markets in the guidance, except for under the capacity and the spacing requirements. So that's how these come, but these are recommendations, and your local health department has the final say, or whomever you answer to for that type of permitting would have the final say in what it is that your market needs to do to be ready to go for 2021. So for 2021, as we said, it's important to communicate with your customer base, make sure they understand what's expected. I think signage at the market is great, but what about Facebook and some of your communications that you do on a regular basis with your customer base? It's a great way to make sure that you let your farmers market customers know what they're going to find when they come to the market. We talked about the wellness screening program as needing to be established, and then the general guidelines. Face coverings, although masks are required, so social distancing is required. We should be monitoring the venue to make sure that our customer base is complying with the recommendations and the requirements. And as long as there is space, given the capacity limits, it's really up to each individual market and their jurisdiction as to what would be considered appropriate at the farmers market for 2021. I do go back to that guidance on food access, and if your decision makers are looking at you as an event, because there's lots of the same kinds of things we've always had at farmers markets, because you have the capacity, that may be a concern. And so I would just recommend that you err on the side of food access rather than event. But whatever that looks like for your community, whatever you look at, as long as you have the adequate capacity for that, that would be fine. Again, communicate through signage, but then also communicate in advance. We talked about the capacity restrictions. We are, as I said, in this Restore Illinois Phase 4, and I am hopeful we will move into bridge to Phase 5, but until we do, we are at the maximum capacity of 25%, or if it's done by square footage, the 15 people per 1,000 square feet. The vendor guidelines, again, follow your state and local requirements. You have to have either hand washing or CDC approved hand sanitizer. Again, encourage your vendors to keep themselves safe, that if they don't have that plexiglass barrier, that they need to put something between themselves and the customer to ensure adequate social distancing where possible, or they have to allow for adequate social distancing, touchless transactions. It's always great when different people handle money versus product, but again, that's if staffing is allows. Make sure that the guidelines for using the link or whatever nutrition assistance programs that your market accepts are followed. And then here's the sanitizing every 2 hours. And prepared food still must be sold as grab and go, because when you think about food that's prepared on site, there's literally no way to eat it on site without wearing a mask or while wearing a mask. So you would have to take that off. And that is not one of the recommendations for the Phase 4. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have on-site food consumption if it's in, let's say, off to the side, or maybe that's where your food trucks are, but that's where they need to follow the outdoor dining guides. So that would be in addition to what is followed for farmers markets. Vendor operations, again, much the same as what we've already talked about, how often to sanitize. I know customers, we like customers to have reusable bags, but again, just an opportunity to exchange, contaminate or to cross-contaminate. So just encouraging vendors to more physically hand their customer the product and let them fill their bag themselves. I'm just going to show just very quickly some of the things that are available to you. These are some of the marketing materials that we put together for last year. I think they still really apply. And so it's something that you can find within ILFMA's Facebook page, and we will begin to start sharing them again. Because again, I think it's really important as our message to our community. We are food access and a place where there's a secure food supply chain. And so that very few people have touched your food from where it is grown till it ends up on your table. We do know that Illinois imports in the 90% of the food that we consume. And so our supply chain is a little more unstable if there is an interruption. But the local food supply chain not only is secure, but it also has very few people touching it from point A to point B. This is something I bring up again, just to remind everybody that we do have a law that says our markets need to be transparent. Our vendors need to be transparent about where their food comes from. If your market allows all sorts of different rules, that's fine. But at the vendor level, at the producer level, they need to identify where that product came from. So if you allow people to sell products that they did not produce themselves, that's fine, but it has to be identified as that. Especially now, as we are really talking about the benefit of local food, I think being transparent really gives our customer base a confidence in the foods that we are offering or in the products that we're offering at farmers markets. We had the mask campaign last year. That's available to you. Feel free to download those and share those to your website, or to your website, to your Facebook page. We did a 10 reasons to shop farmers markets. They are still available to you, and I do believe that these still apply. This was a campaign that we came up with last year about a concierge service idea that when the vendor was selecting product for their customer base and not allowing self-selection, that, really nobody knows the food better than the people that produced it. So allowing the farmer to select for you was actually an added benefit to the customer base. And as I said, communicate your expectations. And my hope is that 2021, as the season progresses, maybe we will see an increase or a change in the capacity limits and some of the regulations that we're following. But with 2020 behind us and knowing how successful 2020 was, I think as we look forward to 2021, with a better educated customer base, my hope is that we will have just an excellent 2021 season as well. And as I said, some of these other models that have started, I think will be continuing. And so I think we're starting to see more and more what I would call hybrid markets, where you have a face-to-face market. Maybe it's also the place where a CSA box is being picked up. It's also the place where a pre-order or curbside order is being processed as well. So we're seeing some innovation, we're seeing some change, and I think those will probably be with us in 2021 as well. So I'm sure Lori has lots of questions for me, and maybe you can share those.
Yes, I do have a few here in the chat box. Please put your questions in the chat box. We can go ahead and address them as we move forward. We have several questions. First one is, does the capacity that you talked about for the farmers markets include vendors or only the patrons?
I would ask that at your local health department level, but as I read the retail guidance, it did not include employees. So I think it would be our patrons, but that would be a good question just for clarification at your local level.
Okay. The second question, they are looking for clarification that if people document that they've had their vaccine, would they count toward those numbers or not?
Yes, I do believe. I haven't seen anything that differentiates vaccinated versus unvaccinated people in counting capacity.
Okay. And I believe you talked about the patrons bringing their own bags again, or reusable bags. Is that correct? They are.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And can you talk any about the recommendations for community programming at markets, maybe music or other programs?
As I said, I think that's going to depend on your capacity as a market and the type of market that you want to put forward. I love, the kids programs and the community events that have always been a part of markets. So I think you have to just keep capacity in mind. The other question is, if capacity is a concern, are you really encouraging people to bring all sorts of kids with them to participate in a kids event? Because that takes up capacity. So I think some of those amenities that we enjoy and love can be nuanced to fit your market, but always with capacity in mind. For example, the music, we just completed our first certified farmers market manager class, which I think we had 20 people complete the program and are now certified farmers market managers here in Illinois. And a couple of things that they suggested is that rather than having like a music stage or whatever, they had a roaming violin player. So they added music to the event, but it wasn't the kind of thing that people would stand around and congregate around, which is what they were discouraging. So they had a roaming person, another person outside of the market limits had a music set up so that it certainly permeated the market area, but did not take up capacity within the market space. So there may be some ways to nuance that, but at the same time, capacity is probably our greatest concern in 2021, or like it was in 2020.
Does Illinois Farmers Market Association still encourage one-way aisle shopping?
I think where, yes, I think where you would find that is most helpful is just making sure that people know which direction to go, and that would encourage your social distancing. It's probably the best way. Just draw those arrows on the pavement. Or like I even said, if you do have a vendor that is going to allow their customers to serve themselves, having one-way arrows to make sure that people don't end up in the middle or causing a bottleneck at any one place.
Okay, we still have a lot of questions concerning outdoor dining requirements or outdoor requirements for people. There is some information out there concerning outdoor dining in phase 4 from the Illinois Department of Commerce. I believe you noted that on your guidance sheets directly, but there are still questions as far as the outdoor dining. Apparently it talks mostly on indoor rather than outdoor. And so do you have any other indications for outdoor dining guidelines and what it's going to look like for the farmers markets?
We will, Lori tells me that our reference in our guidance document to outdoor dining guidelines is broken, and we will fix that. But that's the way it is written in the phase 4 guidance, that if a farmer's market or flea market wanted to add outdoor dining, they would need to follow the outdoor dining guidance. So that would be separate from the farmer's market guidance. So that is something we will look at. It was a link that worked last year, but it's probably been updated since the 2020 season. So we'll look at that.
Okay. I did put that in.
Okay, you put that in the chat?
Yep.
Great. But that is really, anytime you have outdoor dining, you definitely have direct local health department involvement.
Mhm.
And so that would be the place where your local health department, local jurisdiction will probably have an opinion on what that would look like within your market. The other, again, is addressing capacity. Do you have a place for your market vendors that is substantial enough that you can add outdoor dining within the capacity? So those would be questions that I think that each individual market would probably have to answer.
Okay. Other questions that I know that came up during the registration process of the farmers market, there was several questions that came up. One of them is whether there will be allowed to have samples of food at the market this year. Do you know, or is that going to be a public health issue or what?
Well, that would always be a public health issue, but the real goal of samples is to excite someone to buy your product because they're tasting at the point of service, right? And again, how do you taste with a mask on? So that's why samples are not addressed within the guidance, because unless you do samples as grab and go potentially, but that's eliminating your point of service. I've even seen locally that people are putting their product on display, but still not letting, within retail, still not letting people sample, because again, that requires somebody to take their mask off, and that's not what we're encouraging.
And that kind of goes along with the chef demonstrations then.
Yeah, and the chef demo, if it was a demo that I know I've been asked to do a couple times, where I demo the food, but I don't offer samples. That might be something that your local health department would be okay. But again, I think those have much more strength and impact on local sales when in fact someone gets to taste what it is that was actually made by the chef visiting the market. But having chefs or having somebody do some education on the benefits of the food that's being served there, or how to serve it, how to cook with it. Again, if that would fit within your capacity, that might be something you want to pursue.
Okay. There was a question I think you already addressed as far as the entrance and exits for farmers markets having one of each rather than being able to access the market wherever they want, and having only one person per family to help reduce that capacity as well. You still have those.
Right. We didn't put the one person per household within there because, again, we realized that individuals sometimes need to bring a few people with them, or a child with them to shop the market because there's no one else to care for that individual. But that's different than having targeted programming that would bring a large number of a demographic to your market. So I don't know how you would measure capacity unless you had entrances and exits, but that would be something I guess you would have to determine.
Okay. There was a question in there concerning the farmers market nutrition program checks that'll be coming out this summer. Mm-hmm. Have you heard anything from anyone as far as the best resources for vendors and customers in accepting those? Any concern?
No, I think those will come out as planned. They usually come out July 1, July 15th. That's when they begin their showing up at the farmers market. Again, would be something that wouldn't want to touch excessively, but at the same time, that's like taking payment. So you take payment from somebody, then you use the sanitation procedure of just sanitizing or washing your hands, accepting those checks or accepting link tokens. It's just another form of payment that should work out just fine, even though it's not touchless.
Okay. And the question on prepared foods, that's a grab and go. I believe you've already mentioned that. Mm-hmm. there was a question in there concerning some booths or access to booths, like for University of Illinois Master Gardeners having a booth. And I think that's going to depend on whether the market wants to have those type of booths again, or maybe outside businesses having a
Right.
booth directly.
Right. You know, again, I know some communities set limits on the distribution of food vendors versus other types of vendors. But that's within your market guidance. If you don't have a ratio that you are holding to, and you want to have a sponsor booth and you want to have a master garden booth, and that all fits within your capacity limits, then I think you'd be good to go.
Okay. And another question on using their own bags. Yes, the people can bring their own bags to the market to be used,
Yes.
correct? Okay, just wanted
Yep.
to re-verify that. There was a statement in here from Kate concerning the Illinois Bridge to Phase 5 capacity and vaccination, and she was reading through it, and it says that individuals with proof of full vaccination as defined as 14 days after receiving the final vaccination dose, or a negative COVID-19 test 1 to 3 days prior to an event, do not count against capacity limits. Is that your understanding as well?
I will have to look at that when we hit Phase
Yeah.
5 or the
Okay.
bridge to Phase 5.
Right, that would be the bridge to Phase 5. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, children do count toward the capacity for that. Is how many is in the market? Or is there an age cutoff or any? No, I don't believe there isn't an age cutoff. Let's see. We're very thankful for SNAP and Link, but many farmers are not aware of how to accept work and senior coupons, and the information is hard to find online. Is there a link you would be able to share to hand out to produce vendors?
Sure, that's something that we can share. Again, this brings to mind, we are hosting a webinar on April 8th on Link at the market. We will not be addressing the other nutrition assistance programs directly, but we can. And if someone is interested, just email me and I'll send you the link that you need to get a farmer on board with those programs. You know, it is confusing in farmers market world, you know, Link, SNAP, and all the vendors. That program is run by the market, but the senior and WIC coupon program is accepted by the farmer directly and not by the market. And so it does get confusing. And so sometimes I don't think our vendors are aware that they are potentially eligible to apply. But the second part of that is that not every county in Illinois is part of that program. There's only so many resources to go around. And so you have to be able to be selling within the county that accepts that or has that program to really make it beneficial to a farmer producer to become part of that program. So I agree, it's confusing, but if you'd like, if you'd like more information, please feel free to reach out and I can connect you with who you need to talk to.
There's also a link in the chat box to the registration for the webinar coming up on April 8th concerning the SNAP and Link at your farmers markets. So any ideas on how to implement a wellness screening program, such as an app or a website to assist the markets this year?
I don't have an app that is directly available. I did look at there is a wellness screening questionnaire within Restore Illinois that you could use if that's something that you're interested in. But I think making it fairly straightforward and a link, and maybe it's just something that people sign off on as they come to market and they're setting up that, that they're verifying that their team came to market today having completed the wellness questionnaire. So on your end, it's more of you did it. Okay, fine. I'm checking you off. And on their end, maybe publishing something that's pretty simple for everybody to follow could be recommended. And that's something as a resource we could potentially put together.
Okay.
And put that on the toolkit page.
Okay. And I do have one person that's looking for clarification that the capacity of 25% is for the patrons, not the vendors or others that are community group or musicians or anyone else. It's just the patrons. Is that correct?
The way, again, I would clarify that with your local health department,
Okay.
but it did not typically include employees.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from anyone that want to type it into the chat box? Okay. I believe that's all the questions that we have in the chat box right now. So I would like to thank Janie for sharing this important information on maintaining safe farmers markets for the 2021 growing season. I'd also like to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar. And I hope you've received some information that will help you go forward with your farmers market or vendor booth, keeping customer and food safety in mind during the 2021 market season. I also want to remind you of our next webinar, adding link and SNAP acceptance at your farmers market in 2021, scheduled for April 8th, starting at noon. There is a link in the chat box to that registration. Our speaker for that one will be Dennis Ryan, Senior Link Up Illinois Manager through the Experimental Station in Chicago. Dennis will discuss the importance of the Illinois Link and Link Match programs and how it can be incorporated into your farmers market. Again, thank you very much for joining us and have a great day.